Sometimes I like to play with leftover epoxy resin. And what I use is Clearcast 7000, a two-part epoxy resin. And I have a link for this in my Amazon recommendations if you're interested. I use this for all kinds of things. I don't do a lot of actual casting. I do more of, coating, like on my custom keepers. I'll paint the vinyl with alcohol inks, vinyl on the back, and then coat it with resin so that, it's all smooth and cool and fancy. I love these. But sometimes I end up with some leftover resin, if I happen to mix up too much, and I will pour it out on a Teflon sheet and then play with it and see what happens. And I did that with these. This was two different sessions of leftovers. This is the first time I did it, and all I did was just pour out a couple of blobs of resin on my Teflon, and then I just started dropping alcohol inks in there. And I use mostly Pinata. I know you really can't tell because I use my inks, but yes, these are Jacquard Pinata alcohol inks. And, I would just kind of randomly drop. I like the gold on top. It does cool things. So I did that. Layers and layers. You can kind of see underneath some of the different colors I added and played with. Some sink to the bottom, some rise to the top. And wasn't quite like I wanted, so I would squirt it with, this is 91% isopropyl alcohol. And y'all, I found this at my Walmart yesterday. They had it, it's over like where the first aid and makeup stuff is, but it was in the center aisle on a kiosk by itself, and it is the 91%. This is the 32 ounce, 1 quart size, and these are $2.50. And that's a good price for 91%. The higher the percentage, the more expensive they get. I don't know why, but whatever. Anyway, $2.50 for a quart of this at Walmart if you have access to one, FYI. So I stocked up. Back to my technique: alcohol ink, squirt it with alcohol, alcohol ink, squirt it with alcohol, alcohol ink, squirt it with alcohol. You get the idea? Then it kind of looked, oh, okay, that's cool, so I let it cure. I let it cure for like 2 days because I kept picking up the Teflon and it was still flexible, and I thought, well, it hasn't set up yet, so I left it, and then I realized alcohol is a solvent for epoxy resin, and I evidently had enough sprayed into here that it affected the resin's ability to harden, and so it never hardened, but it did cure both of these. This one is a little bit less flexible. I think I messed with it less. I used fewer colors, less alcohol, so it's less flexible. This one is really super duper flexible, but it is fully cured. These are not sticky. They don't stick to each other. They don't stick to themselves. And you can just kind of wad it up, and if you leave it alone, it will eventually flatten back out smooth into its original shape. Kinda magical. So this was like a couple months ago I did this, and then just within the last week I thought, okay, I'm going to do that again just to see if I can repeat that happy accident. Well, I could. I definitely repeated it. Flexible, yet fully cured, and you still can get the beautiful colors and patterns. So then I was like, okay, let's do this sucker on purpose, right? Now, this one I did a little bit different. Instead of just pouring out the resin and adding my inks and spraying, I actually added some alcohol to my resin. This is 2 parts, the 2-part epoxy mixed together, 1 ounce of each, so I have a total of 2 ounces of prepared resin. And what I did was I added a 1/4 ounce of alcohol, 91% isopropyl alcohol, to my mixture and poured it out, and then this is what I got. course I did, you know, all of the inks and stuff and played with that, but it set up very flexible. It's not sticky, it doesn't stick to itself, completely flexible, and again you can wad it up and then it will go back to its original beautiful flat state. Okay, super cool, right? I'm thinking this one might be a little bit too flexible for some of the techniques I have in mind. So I mixed up another batch today, and instead of putting a 1/4 ounce, I'm going to put about 1/8 of an ounce of alcohol in there. And that's because, you know, while I'm adding the inks and things, I squirt it with more alcohol, so more gets in there. And I just want to kind of see kind of what the borderline is between flexible and non-flexible as far as how much alcohol you add. I don't even know if that makes sense. It makes sense in my head, but anyway, I'd like to be able to tell you, mix it, you know, 10-to-1 or whatever to get a good result. And I've just not quite pinned down that ratio yet, so I'm still kind of experimenting. You know, this was 8-to-1 right here. 8 parts of prepared resin to 1 part alcohol. And I'm going to cut the amount of alcohol in half, so that's going to be a 16-to-1, which is going to be quite a bit less alcohol, but then again I am going to be squirting and playing and all that, so we'll see. Let's just see. Let's see what happens. So I mixed up 1 ounce of my hardener and my resin, and been stirring on it for about 5 minutes. And you're really going to want to follow your manufacturer's instructions as closely as possible, and they do vary a little bit sometimes, but of course we're going kind of off the recommended use for this, so you know, you may not, it might take some trial and error is what I'm trying to say, depending on your resin and even your temperature, and lots of things can affect it. Okay, that is about 1/8 fluid ounce, maybe slightly more, of alcohol. I'm going to add it to my resin. And then I'm going to want to mix this super thoroughly. It's going to thin it out quite a bit, but don't panic, it'll be okay. And I'm going to want to stir this. Ideally, I would probably sit and stir this for another 5 minutes. Resin, you always want to stir it for more than you're really comfortable with. You know, because right about the time you think, oh, I'm tired of this, I'm tired of stirring, you look up and you've been stirring for like a minute, maybe. So yeah, just keep stirring. You really want it to be mixed extremely well, and hopefully I had stirred my 2 parts enough already that they were mixed well, but I want this alcohol in there good. Okay, I think I've mixed this enough pretty well. I brought in a piece of cardboard and put underneath my Teflon sheet, and that is just so that I can carry this into another room, because this is not where I want it to sit and cure. Got my alcohol and resin mixed up. Now I'm going to pour it out. And I'm going to pour it out in kind of a rectangular shape, because I'm thinking I want to make journals out of these. I think they would make super cool journals or covers or something. So let's just make it a little rectangular. Now, most of the supplies here that I'm using you can find on my Amazon recommendations. This is just a little silicone mixing cup, and these plastic spatulas I like better than popsicle sticks, because a couple of times, and I guess it's because I bought really cheap popsicle sticks, but I would get like a little piece of wood would break off in my resin, maybe because I was stirring too vigorously. But that was super irritating, and I didn't like that. So I found these little cheap plastic spatula things that I can actually clean off the resin. You know, if I get it while it's wet, I can clean it off with alcohol and reuse them, but they're cheap enough that I can also just consider them disposable if I want to. Now, you're also going to want to have on hand, you're going to want some alcohol to squirt, your alcohol inks, probably a heat gun or a hair dryer will work, and either a lighter or a torch to torch out any bubbles. And I'm going to go ahead and torch out whatever little mixing bubbles that I had. I can see a few, but most of them are the tiny micro bubbles. So let me do that. Now I can start adding my inks. Now this is where it gets a little different from a pour. And can you see the resin kind of starting to shrink in on itself? I noticed when I did the first one that happened, and I'm not sure if that's just the way the resin does, if it's the addition. I have a feeling it's the alcohol that's making it do that. So it changes shape quite a bit, and which can kind of affect the way your ink looks after you add your inks. You know, it may not set up exactly the way you've poured it. So just be prepared for that and go with it. We can do a lot of this moving around while we're working. This is kind of the whole technique that I've been using. I see there's a couple big bubbles that have popped up. Let me get those now. There we go. A few more may come up too. They're just easier to see before you put the alcohol on, and plus there's less fire. Because when you do start putting the alcohol inks and squirting the alcohol all over this, and then you go in with the torch, it does catch fire. Just so you know, there will be fire. But I just consider it, you know, like a little flambe in my kitchen. It fires up, and then I blow it out and just go on with my life. So there we go. Now, inks to use. I finally got some of the big 4-ounce Pinata alcohol inks, and I found the place at the time I was looking that had the best price and biggest selection was Cheap Joe's. I'll put a link down in the video description for Cheap Joe's, where you can grab you some of these larger 4-ounce bottles if you want. This is the normal size, I guess it's a 1/2 ounce. So yeah, you get a lot more in these, and they had a good selection of colors. They didn't have them all, because then I went to Dick Blick's and I ordered some more, because they had some colors I'd not seen before, like a brass and pearl, and those were new to me, so I grabbed some of those just because. And these pipettes, you can pour these into another, you know, squeezy bottle to use, which is fine, but I find that these little pipettes work just fine. I don't really have a color plan. But you just can't go wrong with this Baja Blue. One of my favorite blues. There is Baja Blue. And if you want, you can keep a little cup of alcohol handy. I don't want to put it in there. Where's my, here it is. To clean out your pipette between colors. Just to get the excess ink out. Okay, that was Baja Blue. Now where is, oh yes, I like this lime green. Now, you can kind of move these around a little bit. And white was the only color that Cheap Joe's was out of. And Blick was out of it too. Yeah. I think everyone's doing that Petri dish technique, which takes the white ink. And so that's probably why everybody's out. Put some alcohol on it. Move it around. And this is just all there is to it. It is just ink, alcohol, ink, alcohol, ink, alcohol. Maybe heat gun a little bit. And see what happens. Alright, now I believe I would like some Senorita Magenta. Not yet. Where's that purple? That's what I want. Passion Purple. And if you prefer to use your alcohol in a dropper bottle, you can do that. This is actually denatured alcohol rather than isopropyl. And to me, they act a little bit different with alcohol inks. It's not necessarily that one is better or worse than the other. They're just different. Now, I'm going to move it around a little with my heat gun. This is how it kind of starts to resemble a pour without the pouring. I really love the look of poured resin, you know, with alcohol inks. But it requires you to mix up all these little different containers of resin and then color each one separately and then pour it. And effort and mess and waste. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So that is why I'm just not a big fan. Or actually I am a big fan. I'm a big fan of the look. It's just not something I want to do for myself because of all of the hassle I just mentioned. But doing it like this, you can still get some pretty interesting stuff going on, right? You want to be careful with your first few colors not to make mud. And then when I start to add a different color, I put some white in there, kind of, I don't know, to separate the two, even though it doesn't really separate anything. Maybe it's just in my mind it separates the two. There it is. There we go. Very cool. Now I want to go in with the Senorita Magenta. This is one of my favorite colors. There we go. And see these little holes that are happening? I actually kind of like those. And you may not. That may not be what you want. If it's not, then move your stuff around and fill them in. But I think sometimes they're kind of cool. If you want to, you can use a little stick of some sort that I thought I had. There it is. There's a little stick. You can use this to help with your patterns or to fill in those weird areas there. Totally up to you. Oh, that's nice. I think I want just a tad more of the lime green. I lost most of it. And maybe my Baja Blue, it kind of went away too. I think the purple took over and mixed maybe a little too much with the green. Okay, now let's see what we have. Oh, that's nice. Okay, a little alcohol. And where's my gold? There it is. This is rich gold. Do just a little here and there maybe. Okay, a lot here and there. I changed my mind. Now I want to break up the gold a little bit. Oh yeah. That I think looks lovely. See, I just can't quit messing with it. This is my problem with stuff like this. You know, I get to that point where, oh, it's great, and then I mess with it some more. That's okay. All right, I'm going to go put this in the other room to cure, and we'll have to come back and show you what we end up with.